I was approached, recently we've had a couple of new publishing houses launching in Bangladesh. One is called the Daily Star, which is affiliated with the Daily Star newspaper. It's the largest circulation English language paper in Bangladesh. And I've been a columnist of theirs actually for almost 15 years for their weekend magazine. So I have been working on a collection of short stories of my own, a manuscript, for a while now, but thanks to lifelines and actually having to earn a living in between everything else, I haven't been able to give it the attention I would like to. I've sent individual stories out, so I've now been published in 8 countries actually: the US, UK, Canada, Nepal, Singapore, India, Bangladesh, and France. So I mean that part has been very good, but it's quite, as a short story writer, it's difficult to be taken seriously unless you have a book out of your own short stories, and that I haven't had. So Daily Star approached me. We have the Hay Festival Dhaka coming up. This will be the 3rd year of this festival. It's affiliated with the Hay Festival in the UK. And they said that they would like to bring out a collection and hopefully launch it at the Hay Festival. So it's been a tremendously hurried journey in that sense. Luckily, I had 6 full short stories ready. Some of them have been multiply published already, and 6 pieces of flash fiction. Because I had, in 2010, one of my stories was highly commended in the Commonwealth short story competition. And that story, along with 5 other pieces. So when I return from this trip, hopefully we will be able to finalize that manuscript. They're working on the cover. They've been sending me the proofs. So far it looks very nice. And the working title for the collection is Fragments of River Song, because the rivers are a very big part of our heritage. And what I wanted to say essentially is that, again, a little bit like Lifelines, these stories and pieces of writing tell part of a bigger picture of where Bangladesh is now. There are actually two fragments in this collection which are about 1971. So one is about a young man who returns to his village after the war, and the other one is about a little girl who travels with her family to London as refugees during the war. And so that does come through, as you were saying earlier. This is very much part of a live part of history for us still. But I'm very excited about the prospect of having this book out. I did think about that. There isn't a strong focus on rivers specifically. It was more that, part of a very strong cultural metaphor is these bhatiyalis, the songs that the boatmen sing. And so I think it's more that I would like to use that as a metaphor for storytelling here. They're partial and they're coming from various directions towards us, but there is no strong river theme as such. What there is some focus on Bangladesh outside of the cities. Again, there's one story in particular. It's called the Mosquito Net Confessions, and it's about a young woman who goes to work for a development organization. You may have heard of it, called the Grameen Bank, and she takes a group of people out on this field trip for 2 weeks, and she's very nervous because she's in an alien environment, and it's how she's going to deal with it and how to be taken seriously as a 20-something young woman in a rural environment with colleagues who are not used to someone from the city. And she ends up becoming very good friends with one of the interpreters in the team, because she's taking out a team of French speakers. So they actually she has to do translation from Bangla to English. This other girl has to do translation from English to French, but she has never lived in Bangladesh. She's an expatriate Bangladeshi who speaks no Bangla. And then they have 3 Africans with them who speak no English. So you can imagine this is quite a motley crew. And the story is relatively humorous, I think. But what she discovers is that at night, because of the amount of bugs, because of the season, they sit in the darkness under the mosquito net and they have these conversations when they really get to know each other much better, because it's much less scary in the dark to talk about personal things. So what I wanted to do with this one is actually, again, some of the themes are, I think there's been a lot of writing from diaspora South Asian writers, and a lot of it is very interesting. But I wanted not to do a diaspora focus here. There are 1 or 2 stories which deal with that, but the majority of stories are very much set in Bangladesh, whether it's rural Bangladesh or in Dhaka or Chittagong. Well, as I said, this is still a working title, so I haven't finally decided on it. But I think it's more just, I think it's more of an overall thing, because what I'm trying to put across through this collection is that we are in many ways a society in transition. You have a very traditional, I would say, still culture, as you have in much of India, and against that, you have, for example, the telecommunications revolution. We have the mobile phone coverage in Bangladesh is phenomenal. Everyone. It feels like everyone has a mobile phone. Most younger people have 2 or 3. I have no idea how they do. They will say, "Oh, I have 4 SIMs. I will use my Robi SIM today because they have a special offer on something." So it's interesting, and it permeates every aspect of life. So you actually have tradesmen in the bazaar who will use their mobile phone to find out what the prices are, so that they can price accordingly and they don't get cheated, and so on. And you have some less savory kind of modern developments as a result of this, including pornography applications, text and pictures in Bangla. So, if you transpose that against, the more traditional society, I think it's a very uncomfortable juxtaposition in a way. So the Bhatiyali for me is just drawing on, the more kind of traditional rural metaphors and what you think of as Bangladesh, but using that to tell a story which is much more modern and complex and sometimes uncomfortable. Now, it's interesting, when I first heard about flash fiction myself a few years ago, I thought it was ridiculous. I think the technical definition is supposed to be stories of 1,000 words or under, or at a push 1,500 words or under. And the idea of trying to tell any kind of story in that kind of word count was, I tend to write quite long short stories. So it was completely absurd to me. And I thought, I will never even attempt this. I'm not going to read it and I'm not going to write it. And then the writers group that I'm involved with in Bangladesh, it's called Writers Block, someone there came and told us about the Commonwealth Short Story Competition. That was 2010. And the theme that year was science, technology, and society. And you had to write a short story in 600 words. From what I've said already, I'm sure you will gather just how excited I was at this prospect. But we were going to do this exercise. And I thought about it. I thought, I know nothing about science. I know nothing about technology. So I'll just focus on society. I can just about do that. And somehow the idea that came to me was of how might the institution of marriage change in the future because of science or technology. And I ended up writing what in some ways is actually a science fiction story about a woman who is a very successful scientist and marries very late in life, and then discovers that her husband has decided to replace her with a humanoid robot. And the story is called Judgment Day because it's a very short, 600 words. So I wrote the 600-word version, and that was the one that got awarded in the Commonwealth competition. And then I had this character and the story in my mind, so I then expanded it to probably around 1,200 words. So the version of this story, which is renamed The Assessment, that appears in Fragments of River Song, is a slightly longer version of it, but it still fits the criteria of less than 1,500. So I have one story like that. Then I have another story which is the two, in fact, that I mentioned to you about 1971, both of those are flash fiction. The young man who comes back to his village and the little girl who goes as a refugee to London. Then there is a fourth one which is told in a teenage voice of a Bangladeshi girl in high school in the US, or rather an American Bangladeshi girl in high school in the US. And really, again, what my aim was actually with this collection, there are some stories in it which are very much literary fiction. In that sense, I've been told that my style is literary fiction, but what I wanted to do was to make this collection as engaging as possible. So there's quite a lot of range. There are a lot of different voices, there are a lot of different circumstances, and in fact, in one story, it's called Waiting. There are three. It's told from the perspective of 3 sets of characters whose life intersect for a very brief moment. One is a young boy, 12 or 13, who lives in a slum with his family. And when he can, he does sort of errands for the market traders, and when there is no work, he has to beg with his sister, which he hates to do. So there's him, then there is a teenage girl, and there is a teenage middle-class girl, and then there is a woman whose husband is, this is a phenomenon well known in India as well, has made an obscene amount of money from some business ventures, and wants to make sure that everyone understands how much money she has. So these 3 characters meet, and it's set during Ramadan. So it brings up also some of those questions about how we observe things and what it really means. How much of, for example, festival expenditures here also are done for show, and how much are done for deeper reasons in a way. So these three characters, they meet at one point in the story, and it's just a very brief meeting, but it has an effect on all of their lives. And what I liked about that story was I felt that I hope I succeeded, I tried to tell a story from different stratas of society in one instance. So those are some of the aspects that I tried to cover with the collection. I think this will not go down with people who feel very strongly about the purity of identity, but I think identity is a little bit like language. It does, it develops and adapts because of circumstance. So I would like to think that, we will retain some of what you might consider our identities of origin, our sort of ancestral identities, and we will have to adapt somewhat to where we live and what the prevailing norms and cultures are there. You can, if you decide that you want to go and live in, let's say, Central, Western Europe, you may have very strong views on how women should dress or certain things. These are not transferable. What is acceptable in your society of origin may well not be acceptable somewhere else. So I think then you make that choice, and particularly for your children. I mean, I have met so many second-generation immigrants, and that is with such issues about their identity. Either it's what I would call an almost unhealthy kind of desire to hold on to the old ways and stand out by doing that. Make yourself alien to others around you, which is, I think, perhaps not the best way to persuade anyone that your culture of origin is an attractive one, because they just think that you're behaving strangely. Or to just reject it completely and say, I am not Indian, I am American, or I am not Bangladeshi, I am British. And you can do that, of course, but I believe that, where we come from is always part of who we are. And we are better off understanding, perhaps, and this is quite a painful and detailed process of understanding what we want to take from that origin culture. There is almost always quite a lot worth taking, whether it's literature or music, or, you don't have to subscribe to every conservative thought or idea in order to still say, I'm Bengali, or I have a Bengali identity. You may be in Delhi, you may even within India, you may be very far from Bengal. And I found that even, when I'm in India and I'm around Bengalis, inevitably we end up speaking in Bangla, because there is a sense of connection that comes from that. So I think you need to, in the final analysis, I think you need to sort out what are your priorities. Is it language? Is it culture? Is it some aspect of music or literature or celebration or religion or whatever it is? What is really important to you? And then make an effort to be knowledgeable about that aspect of your identity and to practice it and to share it with others in a positive way. And, the rest of it is, going to require some adjustment from all of us, as long as we live in the 21st century in an increasingly homogenized global world.